All right, man, let's talk Drake Maye. You've watched a little Drake Maye. I think you're even lower on you haven't loved Drake Maye,
Right.
UNC quarterback.
Yes.
And we're getting this buzz around the NFL as mock drafts come out. The mock drafts are sometimes a little bit of the mock drafters' evaluations and a little bit of what they hear. And the most recent mock that we're going to cover today is Lance Zierlein from NFL.com. Lance has Jaden Daniels going number 2 to the Washington Commanders, and I believe it's in part because he's a little either he's a little lower on Drake Maye, he's hearing more negative type of buzz, or he's not the lock at number 2, or a little combination of both. He's got Drake Maye actually going at 5 to the Falcons, who trade up in this mock.
Yeah, and I think this is now the second big mock. Was it? I think it was Jeremiah's mock. No, maybe it was Mel Kiper that had them flipped as well. That had
Mel
Jaden
had
Daniels.
them flipped.
Yeah. And we were saying when we sort of ran through those top 10s that, you know, sometimes Mel Kiper in particular likes to put these things out as sort of discussion points, right? Like, hey, look, we should be talking about this more. And we were saying that's a good thing, because I think that is a conversation that should be being had. Maybe not, I wasn't coming at it from the Jaden Daniels side of things, but the more I watched of Drake Maye, the more I was like, I can see why people don't love this, right? I can see why we would be getting questions about, is he really that top elite prospect? And, you know, the more you watch, like, there's quite a lot of negative in here. The positive is great, the positive is obvious, and we're in this world now where it's like, how much do you weigh one versus the other? And that's getting harder as the years go by. But there's a lot of negative on Drake Maye's tape. And even if you just watch, say, Tez Walker tape, right? The number of misses or not good throws from Drake Maye is significant.
Yeah, I mean, I will say those were some of my early notes coming into this season with Maye. To me, it felt like footwork issues, just straight footwork issues. You know, he's going to miss a little swing pass or a little stick route. It's some of the easy stuff he tended to miss. But I think my analysis coming out of that, though, was he's still really young. And last year, he was a redshirt freshman, right? In 2022, he's only had 2 years starting. He's still only 21 years old. I don't always use the age as an excuse or even an explainer, because it doesn't always mean you're going to get better.
Right.
But I think in the Drake Maye, Jaden Daniels discussion, it's an interesting one, because when we saw Jaden Daniels at, say, 21 years old at Arizona State, nobody thought he was going to be a future, top 3 round pick. You know, he had teammates at Arizona State who didn't like him. They were saying good riddance, whatever, and he goes to LSU and he has a really nice 2022 and then an elite 2023 season. My point is, with Maye, I think the fact that he's 21, 2 years as a starter, I think he can clean up some of those issues. I think a lot of them are footwork related, and he can get better there. I think he's got all the tools to succeed. And when you compare him to Daniels directly, Daniels as a 23-year-old last year in the SEC has that 94.7 grade, the Heisman season, unstoppable as a runner, breaks the stat sheet. But I think that stuff matters when you're comparing those two players.
Well, it's like how important is seeing it versus assuming he'll get to that, right?
Yeah.
Like with Daniels, the fact that he's older meant that we got to see that year, and now that's what we can judge him on. Whereas with Maye, it's like, we don't know that he can get to that level yet. We assume he can because he's young and the rest of his game is so good and the tools are all there. But now you have to project, and you have to say, you know, in the NFL, with these tools, with the experience, with the growth and the age and the development and the maturity, does he get to that spot? Or does he get ahead of that spot? But that's now the conversation, right? It's projecting what he can be more than sort of being sure what he is right now, and what he is right now being good enough to be that guy.
Yeah, and I'm not just guessing on Maye. I mean, I think everything else he's done is really good. You know, PFF grade of 91.6 in 2022 in his first year as a starter, 90.7 last year. I know people soured on Maye a little bit down the stretch, Clemson, NC State games, but I mean, I still think he's really good. I really think Maye's feel in the middle of the field is unbelievable. I think the way he throws the ball in between the numbers, his touch, his accuracy, he can throw a seam with zip, he can layer it. I feel like he's unbelievable at that part of the field. I want to see him do better throwing the ball outside the numbers, a little bit more touch on deep balls. He's flashed a little bit of that outside the pocket magic that I think you at least want to see. We don't want to build a whole case off that, but you want to see it. I think Maye has shown all of that. I mean, to me, Maye's still the guy at 2. It's just interesting to me that there's so many people around the NFL maybe saying that's not locked in, you know?
The underlying numbers across the board are really good, right? Like even with whatever flaws we're talking about being factored in, as you said, his PFF grade has been 91.5, 90.6. Now those aren't insanely good, right? We saw Kyler Murray, Baker Mayfield, those start pushing 93, 94, 95 even. So it's not at that level, but it is very good. And even things like, big time throw rate is extremely high, turnover worthy play rate is pretty low, adjusted completion rate is good. The only area you can find where the numbers are kind of weak is, I think, some ball location stuff, and that does show up. But even with all that put together, it's still more than good enough to be getting talked about as a really good prospect, particularly when you factor in prototypical height, prototypical size, prototypical arm, better athleticism than he's going to get given credit for because of the way he looks, but he can definitely move. So I think all the tools are there, and the level of play is already really good. We're not talking about a total project who, can't hit anything, is wildly inaccurate, and doesn't have all this kind of stuff. We just think there's the capacity for him to do that. We're most of the way there. It's just that the flaws are maybe bigger than they looked if you just took a surface level, quick run through his tape. Yep, it's all there. The more you watch, the more it's like, there's some more problems than I would have liked, but I don't think they're disqualifying.
So in the coming weeks, we'll get into more of our QB rankings and wide receiver rankings. The Jaden Daniels move, I'm not ready to put him, certainly not above Drake Maye. I don't even know if I would want to take him at 3 or 4 just yet. I think there are some concerns
to me
about Daniels, who is a dynamic playmaker, absolutely a dynamic, and makes some incredible throws. Slot fade, outstanding, throws outside the numbers really well.
I'm not sure any of the Drake Maye, like the negatives, are even enough to take him away from both 2 as QB2 and the number 2 overall pick. To me, all it did was separated Caleb Williams and Drake Maye. Like, I think going into the process, that was sort of the conversation, right? Caleb Williams has been the presumptive number 1 for a long time, but we've been saying there are going to be people that have Drake Maye number 1, not Caleb Williams, in large part because of the Caleb Williams negatives, right? And most of that is sort of, it's the intangible stuff. Oh, he paints his nails. Oh, he cried. Oh, all that kind of stuff.
I mean, it was on the field, too. He struggled under pressure. He's kept turning the ball over
but
down
anyway,
the stretch.
There were going to be people that had Drake Maye number 1. To me, when you start, the more you dive into the tape, the more it becomes pretty clear, I think, that it is Caleb Williams number 1, and then there's a gap.
Yeah.
And maybe maybe Drake Maye is the next guy, and there's a clear number 2, but there is a gap, I think.